Human rights commissions, their purpose is meant for good, designed to protect people from blatant discrimination. But far too often, these tribunals run by unaccountable, unelected bureaucrats become kangaroo courts, creating a forum to leverage petty complaints into major retribution. I've made the point on the show before, we don't need these HRCs, human rights commissions. Let real breaches of the law go through real courts, not kangaroo courts. And to make matters worse, HRCs have the blinders on, acting on some so-called violations but not others. A heinous hypocrisy that inadvertently actually supports discrimination, which is what they do. Our next guest is furious. It's time for some Friday Fury. Anthony Furey, comment editor and columnist at the Ottawa Sun, all fired up about the kangaroo courts and their hypocrisy. But Anthony, before we get into all this, CTV is slamming the Sun for its Welcome to Hell cover.
At all times, we definitely want to take, a temperate tone in our dialogue. I mean, come on, welcome to hell.
But where does
they actually said they wanted a minority government.
Yes, the ever-temperate Scott Reid, the measured man who always watches what he says.
Don't give people $25 a day to blow on beer and popcorn. Give them childcare spaces that work.
The tempered guy who once said, quote, Alberta can me, who thinks you're stupid and big government knows best. Anthony, blow some wisdom my way.
Scott Reid is a pure Philistine, doesn't know what he's talking about. Jean-Paul Sartre, he famously said, hell is other people. That was in a play called No Exit, in which a bunch of people were crammed into a hotel room together, couldn't get out. Hell is not crazy wildfire, brimfire, and whatnot. It's being stuck with more of the same that you just can't handle, that slowly eats away at you, that slowly takes money away from your family, that slowly dismantles your government, or unfortunately builds your government bigger and bigger, which is what we're gonna have with Dalton McGuinty. Government spending gone up 80%, all these new boards, agencies, and commissions, all these union workers just paid off with higher and higher wage increases every year. Welcome to hell. Sorry, Scott, that's what it is. You're just too dense to figure it out.
It just puzzles me. You've got all these people in Ontario, some of whom vote for the Liberals, all of whom are giving advice to the Greeks and the Italians and the Spanish and everybody else, to the Americans. You know, you people have got to get responsible with your balance sheets. I mean, if your GDP is not growing or it's only growing at 1%, you can't increase public sector salaries by 4% and 5% and 6% and then tack on every fad, the wind turbines and everything else. You've actually got to be much more balanced. Otherwise, your economy will be a train wreck. So we've got these Canadians, many of whom, very many of whom are based in Ontario, who preach this stuff all over the world, but hypocrites that they are, they don't want to practice it in Ontario.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people like to say, oh, I'm a Keynesian economist. Well, yeah, I have no doubt you may be, but you don't actually understand the fact that Keynes also said after you do all this crazy government spending, after you go all high on the hog, you actually have to balance the books after the fact. And the Dalton is not looking to do that. And that's going to be a major problem. Welcome to hell.
All right, Ontario Human Rights Commission, the reason I booked you for this segment, even though we have you on every Friday, the reason I booked you for this specific segment is, although you've been talking about the HRCs before, this week's takes the cake. What's the story on Human Rights Commission hypocrisy in your own backyard?
Well, following up to a story that the CanWest chain of papers put out, a bunch of us looked into the fact that, wait a second, a bunch of people are putting out discriminatory housing postings, and that violates human rights commissions. So shouldn't we be able to complain to human rights commissions and say, hey, these housing postings are violating our rights? Now, you may think, oh, what are you referring to? Or do you think people are putting up housing postings saying whites only, or men only, or no gay people? Well, no, they're not. And if they were, I think those people would at least have a right to complain about it. They're being denied their housing. No, what I'm referring to is a bunch of housing postings that were discovered in the GTA area saying Muslims only.
And is the HRC saying there's a difference between a posting that says, when a landlord posts Muslim only, that there's a difference between that and a landlord saying no gays, no Jews, no Anthonys? I mean, is that their point?
Well, last time I checked, I would have assumed that no discrimination based on gender, ethnicity, or religion meant just that. But apparently it doesn't, because the Human Rights Tribunal in Ontario has said, oh, those Muslim-only ads, we don't really have the resources to look into those. We just can't spend the time on it. And yet they seem to always have the resources to look into a comedian making a joke that some people are uncomfortable with, or to put forward a proposal for a national press council, which Barbara Hall of the Ontario Human Rights Commission did in 2009, even though she doesn't have national jurisdiction, even though she doesn't have jurisdiction over the press. So discriminatory housing going on against other minorities, other religious groups, people who aren't Muslim, but they ain't going to look into those.
So your take is that if the ad said, I'll just replace Muslim with heterosexual, heterosexuals only, there might be a problem.
Charles,
because
you can go to jail for just saying that. So don't we better not say that. We better not hypothesize those things.
All right.
Bam, they would. They put you through the tribunals.
All right. So straights only or heterosexuals only wouldn't work. Would Christians only work?
Don't think so.
They have some ads in Manitoba on Kijiji that says Christians preferred, and nobody in Manitoba so far is getting into trouble with that. And I don't know whether there's a nuance there, preferred or only, but I think Christians only, there'd be a problem, certainly with the Ontario Human Rights Commission. I guess we could go down the line further and further into this, but I guess, are you telling me that there's something about the M word, Muslim, that makes the Ontario Human Rights Commission stay away?
I guess so. I guess they're just afraid to go after these people and make them abide by the same laws that everyone else is abiding by. Our fellow member of the Commentariat, Irshad Manji, always makes a great point when she says, if you're not enforcing the law upon minority groups, what you're actually doing is persecuting the minorities within those minority groups and other minority groups. So not making Muslims accountable to this law ends up violating many other minority groups within the Muslim community. It violates other minority groups. It's stopping them from having good housing. We really need equality of the law for everybody.
Now, Anthony, one of the reasons that you were emailing me about this earlier this week is because it was completely pertinent to a particular question I asked you on this program a very short time ago. What was the question that I asked Anthony Furey that planted the seed for all of this curiosity?
Well, right, we were talking about human rights commissions, and you said to me in the commercial break, hey, has there ever been a time in which someone has filed a complaint against a minority group because a person in that minority group had been discriminating against other minorities or non-minorities? And I said, and also that they hadn't followed through on the complaint was part of your question. And I thought, you know what, Charles, that's an interesting question, but no, I don't think that's happened. And come on, I mean, if it did, they'd obviously enforce it. They're not that bad. And we both said, yeah, I guess so. Lo and behold, look what happens.
Now, do you suppose that as far as these apartment buildings go, that any Christians or Jews or members of other faiths, of other cultures will say, I really, really want to get into that building and I'm being discriminated against? Is there any risk of that?
Well, there's no risk of it, but the whole reason why, and I'm a huge property rights advocate, I'm a huge freedom of choice for business owners, for everyone, but the whole reason is that let's say there is only a few spaces available and a landlord is being discriminatory and they decide we don't want gay people in our Muslim-only building. Well, they're essentially running the gay people out of town. They're essentially doing a soft genocide on the gay community in that city, and that's why we just can't allow workplace or housing discrimination.
All right, bottom line, the HRC has an agenda, and the agenda is to simply say that white people, especially white Christian people, especially white Christian males, have it in for the rest of society, and they will look for every opportunity to make the point. It isn't about human rights. It's about a very, very narrow, anti-mainstream agenda. Anthony Furey, thanks for getting furious on us.
Anytime. Have a great weekend.
Anthony Furey, comments editor, Ottawa Sun.